This show is produced by the Harwood Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Cindy Harris, and we love making this show available to you free of charge. If you'd like to help us keep it that way, make a contribution to our Karma Jar or become a show sponsor. To learn more, visit our website. Today I'm making a batch of these great little soft pretzels. Recently I received an email from Maria in Kuwait, and she was asking if I could show how to make these. And you know, they're really quick and easy to make. They don't take a long rise even though they are a yeast dough, and they taste great. I'm going to be making this dough today in my KitchenAid using my dough hook, and I'm going to let it do the kneading for me. But if you don't have a machine like this, you can certainly do the whole thing by hand, and it's not a problem at all. We're going to start by getting a large mixing bowl. Now I'm going to use my KitchenAid bowl, and in it I'm going to get 1/4 cup of water, and the water needs to be between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to pour that in my bowl, along with 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. And here in the States, that would be 1 packet of yeast. And along with the yeast, 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. And I'm going to take my whisk and I'm going to whisk that together. I want the yeast to start to dissolve. And then I'm just going to let this sit here for about 10 minutes. Now after 5 to 10 minutes, the yeast is going to get kind of foamy, and then it's time to add the rest of our ingredients. So I'm going to start by adding 1 1/2 cups of warm milk. Again, this milk is between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And then 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. And I'm going to take my whisk and I'm just going to stir all of that together. Now that's all of our wet ingredients. Now I'm going to add my flour, and because I'm using my KitchenAid, I'm going to put the bowl now on the mixer and then bring my flour over. And we want to start out by measuring 4 cups of flour. And as always, I want to lighten that flour up a little bit, so I'm stirring it with a knife, and then I'm just going to dip, level that off, and put that right in my mixing bowl. So I want to end up measuring out 4 cups of flour. And now I'm going to put my dough hook on. And if you were going to do this by hand, what you'd want to do is get a wooden spoon and start mixing that flour in. But because I'm using the dough hook, I'm going to put this on a medium speed, and I'm going to get that starting to mix up. And then after a minute or so, I'm going to add 1/2 cup more of flour. And now I'm going to let this knead in here for 5 minutes. Now if you were doing this by hand, you would want to, once the dough comes together, go ahead and take it out, put it on a lightly floured board, and start kneading it for 5 minutes. Now after 5 minutes of kneading, I'm going to take and put a little flour on my board. Now if I had kneaded this by hand, I would already have flour on it. And then I'm going to take my dough and put it right on my floured board. Now this dough is nice and elastic, really smooth, just a teeny bit sticky, but not much, and with that little bit of flour on our board, it's just fine. Now we don't need to let this dough rise, but we do want to let it rest for about 5 minutes. So I'm just going to take a clean dish towel and I'm going to lay it right on top of the bread and just let it sit here for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, we're going to take our towel off, and the dough is nicely rested, and now we're going to shape it into our pretzels. We need to divide our dough into 24 pieces. I'm using something called a bench scraper, but you could certainly use a knife. And I'm going to start by dividing the dough in half. And then that way I need to get 12 pieces out of each one. And I'm going to do the same thing with this half of the dough. And when we're all done, we have 24 little pieces of dough here. Now the next thing we have to do is take each of the little pieces of dough, and we need to roll them into long ropes with our hands, just like this. And then I always have a little ruler on the side of my cutting board. That way I can tell just about how long the rope is. And that ends up being about 12 inches, which is perfect. Now over here I've got my baking sheet with a piece of parchment because that's where I'm going to mold these pretzels. So I'm going to bring the rope of dough over here, and then all we have to do is lay it down and just remember what a pretzel looks like. I'll take the one end, fold it over, one end, fold it over, and there we have one formed pretzel. So that's pretty easy to mold. And then I'm just going to continue shaping these right on my baking tray. Now you can see this is a really nice dough to work with. I haven't had to add any more flour, and it's not sticking to my hands at all. Now on this tray for this size pretzel, I'm going to put 8 pretzels on here. Now to get these pretzels ready for the oven, I've got 1 egg, and I'm just going to beat that up with a fork. And then with my brush, I'm just going to lightly brush some of that egg wash on top. And then I have some coarse kosher salt, and I'm just going to take that and sprinkle it on top of each one. I've preheated the oven to 425 degrees, and these are going to bake from between 12 to 15 minutes until they're really golden brown. And while they're in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and form another tray. Now when you start to get at the end of your little pieces of dough, one of the ways you can also roll them out is just roll them right on your cutting board and just kind of press them. You can get a nice rope pretty quickly. And here they are out of the oven. We want to get them right off the baking sheet and let them cool on a rack. Now you can see these are nice and golden brown. They have a nice crust on them, and you can serve them warm right out of the oven. Now when you're going to serve these little pretzels, there's a couple of ways that you can do them. Certainly warm is great, or at room temperature. You can serve them plain like this if you were going to serve them, say, with a soup or something. Also, if you wanted to serve them sort of as a snack, they're great dipped in a warm pizza sauce, like a marinara sauce, or you can dip them in a warm cheese sauce, or even put mustard on top of them. Well, if you'd like to try making some soft pretzels at home, just go to our website and visit the Daily Bread show notes, and I'll have the recipe there for you. And as always, if you have any questions, please send me an email. I'll see you next time.